the same as just completing the square, but here's what you have to do. This time there's probably going to be a constant term. You have to move that to the other side first before you start completing the square. And then you're going to add your new constant term to both sides. Then you're going to factor, and then you're going to solve by taking square root. So your papers are kind of cut, hopefully so that you can kind of fold half of your paper over and cover up those steps so you can just reveal them one by one as you're solving the equation. And it should help kind of walk you through the steps and break it down and not be quite so complicated. So let's do that. Everybody fold your paper in half, cover up those steps. Okay. And then we're going to do number 13 from the worksheets. And I didn't cut them super neatly, so it may not work out exactly. Okay. But probably the easiest way is to take the side that's not cut and fold it over the other side instead of having to fold all the individual pieces one at a time. Okay, so keep all your steps covered and we're going to reveal them one at a time. Okay, so number 13 is m squared minus 2m minus 75 is equal to 0. Looking at this, it looks like it would be a pretty simple factoring problem, but I don't know that we can find any factors of 75 that add to give us 2. So we're going to tackle this by completing the square instead of using the quadratic formula. So first step, flip over your first piece of paper there. First step, well, actually the first two. The first one's just the title. Flip over the first two. First step is to move the constant to the other side. So the constant is the 75 here. Now to move it to the other side, we've got to add it. So we've got m squared minus 2m. Now, usually we go ahead and put our equal sign right after that, but I'm going to leave myself a blank space because I'm getting ready to complete the square. Okay, so I'm going to leave myself a blank space where the 75 was so that I can complete the square. All right, so the next step is to complete the square. So first step in completing the square is that we divide b by 2. So I'm going to go over here to the side. My b is 2. So I'm going to divide it by 2. I get 1. I'm going to square it. And I get 1 again. So I'm going to complete the square. I'm going to put it over there. But I can't just add 1 to my equation. That changes the whole equation. It's unbalanced. So we've got to keep it balanced. If we add it to the right side, we've also got to add it to the left side. Okay, if we add it to the right side, we've also got to add it to the, if we add it to the left side, we've also got to add it to the right side to keep it balanced. Okay, because if I look at this, if I subtract 1 from both sides, I've still got what I started with. Okay, I haven't actually changed anything. I've just added a few things that I need. Okay, so next step is to factor. Okay, factor. Well, I know how this is supposed to factor. It's m minus, because the 2 is negative, and I squared 1, so 1's what goes in my parentheses. And 75 plus 1 on the right side is 76. Okay, so flip down a couple more. I'm not sure what number we're on. I'm not gonna lie, I kind of got a little ahead of myself there. Okay, but we should be at the step where it says take the square root of both sides. We can do that because our entire left side is squared. So we are going to take the square root of both sides. Taking the square root of something that is squared cancels out the square. We've just got the m minus 1. And I think I put a note there, don't forget the plus or minus. Anytime you take a square root, you've got to include the positive and the negative. 76 is not a perfect square. Okay, 76 is not on my list of perfect squares right here, so I'm just going to leave that under the square root. And my last step is to get my variable completely by itself. Right now we're subtracting 1, so we've got to add 1 to both sides. Now be careful. You can't change what's under the square root. So that 1, that positive 1, goes in front of the plus or minus. So those are our two answers to this quadratic equation. 1 plus the square root of 76 and 1 minus the square root of 76. Notice it looks kind of similar to the way our answers turn out in the quadratic formula. The good thing about completing the square is a lot of times it will be in a simpler form than the quadratic formula would have given it to you, so it's more likely that your answer here is going to match one of the answer choices. Let me show you really quickly how to check this. If you didn't have multiple choice answer choices, if you solve an equation, you can always plug it back in. So here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to do 1 plus the square root of 76. And have you ever wondered what this button right beside the 1 does? STO with an arrow. Okay, if you press that, it's going to store that number as, I'm going to store it as x. Okay, I'm going to store it as x. So then I'm going to go back to my equation, and I'm just going to type in my equation, x squared minus 2x minus 75, and press enter, and it gives me 0. Okay, so that keeps me from having to type that in every time I'm plugging it in for m in my equation. So if you've ever wondered why, if you type in an equation into your calculator and you press enter trying to solve it, you think, well, there's an x on here, so why can't I just type it in? It doesn't actually solve it for you. What it gives you is it plugs in whatever has been stored as x at some point in time, it plugs it in and just spits it back out to you. That's one way that you can check these answers. I could also do 1 minus the square root of 76. I could do it the same way. Okay, close the parentheses, store it as x. It's going to overwrite what I stored before. Press enter. Okay, so that's the decimal approximation for 1 minus the square root of 76. And I can do the same thing. X squared minus 2x minus 75. And that one gives me 0 as well. Okay, so just wanted to show you something there on your calculator that might come in handy, save you some time and effort. Okay, let's do another one. Okay, let's look at number 14. X squared minus 12x plus 13 equals 7. X squared minus 12x plus 13 equals 7. So this is a little bit different than what we've been doing. We've always been trying to get these equal to 0 for graphing, factoring, and the quadratic formula. But with completing the square, you don't get it equal to 0. You move your constant to the other side. So we're going to subtract 13, but this time there was already a constant over there. So we still leave our blank space where the 13 was, and 7 minus 13 is negative 6. Okay, let's go over to the side and complete the square. Divide b by 2. b was 12. 12 divided by 2 is 6. Square that. We get 36. So we add 36 to both sides because we got to keep it balanced. If we add it to the left side, we've got to add it to the right side. We factor that perfect square trinomial that we just created. X squared minus 12x plus 36 is x minus, because 12 was a negative, we squared 6, so 6 goes in our parentheses, and negative 6 plus 36 is 30. Okay, what's next? Square root. We take the square root of both sides. The square root and the squared cancel. So we've got x minus 6 is equal to the plus or minus square root of 30. Last step, add that 6 to the other side. So that is 6 plus or minus the square root of 30. You never change what's under that square root unless you're simplifying the square root. Okay, you cannot change that number under the square root by adding or subtracting or multiplying or dividing. Okay, you cannot change that number. So that 6 just goes in front. Now, I didn't do an example like this, but if that were x plus 6, if we had to subtract it, then this would be negative 6. Okay, this would be negative 6 if we had to subtract it from both sides. All right? Just like with the quadratic formula, these square roots right here may simplify. Okay, the number under the square root may simplify. I'm not going to go through those steps with you guys. You just need to compare the decimal values of your answer to the answer key. Okay?